The night was quiet in the Nevada desert. Staff Sergeant David Rodriguez was walking his usual patrol route along the military base perimeter. He had done this walk hundreds of times before. The desert was always peaceful at this hour, with only the sound of wind moving through the sand dunes. David was thinking about his family back home when something incredible happened. A bright light suddenly appeared in the dark sky above him. At first, he thought it might be a shooting star, but this light was different. It was moving slowly and making a strange humming sound that seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath his feet. The light grew bigger and brighter as it came closer to Earth. David could see now that it wasn't a star at all. It was some kind of aircraft, but unlike anything he had ever seen in his 12 years of military service. The craft had a smooth, curved shape that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Strange symbols were carved along its sides, pulsing with colors that shifted from blue to silver to gold dots suddenly. The mysterious aircraft began to shake violently. Sparks of energy shot out from different parts of the craft. Black smoke started pouring from what looked like engine compartments. David watched in amazement as the vessel began falling toward the desert floor, leaving a trail of glowing particles in the night sky. The crash was louder than anything David had ever heard. The impact sent shockwaves through the desert sand, knocking him backward. When the dust settled, he could see the wreckage about half a mile from his position. The craft had carved a deep trench in the sand and was now partially buried in a small hill. David knew he should immediately radio his commanding officer and report what he had witnessed. Military protocol was clear about unusual sightings. He was supposed to secure the area and wait for backup. But something deep inside him was pulling him toward the crash site. It felt like an invisible force was calling to him, urging him to investigate against all his training. David left his patrol route and began running toward the wreckage. As he got closer, he could see that the mysterious craft was even more unusual than he had first thought. The material it was made from looked like metal, but it seemed to be alive somehow. The surface rippled like water, and strange patterns of light moved beneath it like veins carrying energy throughout the structure. Parts of the craft were cracked open from the impact. Through these openings, David could see a soft, pulsing light coming from inside. The light was beautiful but also seemed urgent, like it was trying to communicate something important. As he approached the main opening in the craft's hull, David heard a sound that made his heart race. It was a voice, but not speaking any language he recognized. The words were melodic and flowing, almost like singing, but filled with pain and desperation. Someone or something inside the craft was calling for help. David climbed carefully through the opening in the hull. The inside of the craft was incredible. The walls were covered with panels that displayed moving symbols and images he couldn't understand. The air had a strange, sweet smell, like flowers mixed with electricity. Everything glowed with that same soft light he had seen from outside. In the center of the craft's main chamber, David found her. She was lying on what appeared to be some kind of medical table, surrounded by blinking devices and floating screens showing her vital signs. But she wasn't human. The being was clearly female and roughly human-shaped, but her skin had a beautiful blue color that seemed to glow from within. Her hair was long and silver, flowing like liquid metal. She was wearing some kind of form-fitting suit that appeared to be made from the same living material as the craft itself. But what struck David most were her eyes. They were large and expressive, filled with intelligence and something that looked unmistakably like fear. She was obviously badly injured. Silver liquid that must have been her blood was seeping from wounds on her arms and torso. Her breathing was shallow, and the glow in her skin was getting dimmer by the minute. Some of the medical devices around her were making urgent beeping sounds. When she saw David, the alien being tried to sit up. She spoke again in her musical language, and this time David noticed a small device near her throat beginning to glow. Suddenly, he could understand her words as if she were speaking perfect English. Her name was Princess Zara, and she came from a star system very far from Earth. She had been traveling on a diplomatic mission when her spacecraft was sabotaged by enemies of her people. The crash had triggered a medical emergency that was slowly taking her life. Her body was shutting down from injuries that her own medical technology couldn't heal. But there was hope. Zara explained that her species had visited Earth many times. Throughout history, over thousands of years, some humans had developed genetic markers that made them compatible with her people's biology. Through her ship's sensors, she had detected that David carried these special genetic traits. In simple terms, this meant that David's blood might be able to save her life. But the procedure would be dangerous for both of them if their blood types weren't as compatible as the sensors indicated. The transfusion could be fatal for both human and alien. David looked into her fading eyes and saw something he recognized. Despite all the differences between them, despite the fact that she came from another world, he could see that she was a person just like him. She had hopes, fears, and dreams. She had people who cared about her and were probably worried sick, not knowing what had happened to her dot in the distance. David could hear the sound of helicopters approaching. His absence from patrol had been noticed, and search teams were coming to investigate the crash site. Whatever decision he was going to make, he had to make it quickly. Zara reached out and gently touched his hand. Her skin was warm despite its unusual color, and he could feel a strange tingling sensation where they made contact. Through the translation device, she whispered that she understood if he couldn't help her. She knew she was asking him to risk everything for a complete stranger from another world. But David had already made his choice, looking at this dying princess. He realized that the boundaries between worlds and species didn't matter as much as the simple human impulse to help someone in need. He rolled up his sleeve and asked her what she needed him to do. The helicopters were getting closer now, their searchlights beginning to sweep across the desert sand. Whatever was about to happen next would change both of their lives forever. David took a deep breath and nodded to Princess Zara. He had made his decision, and there was no turning back now. The helicopters were getting louder, but he pushed that worry aside. Right now, saving this alien princess was the only thing that mattered. Zara guided him to a strange medical device that looked like a combination of a scanner and a surgical tool. The machine was unlike anything David had ever seen. It had no buttons or controls that he could recognize. But when Zara placed her hand on its surface, the device came to life with gentle pulses of light. She explained that the procedure would connect their blood in a way that went beyond simple transfusion. Her people had developed this technology thousands of years ago for emergency medical situations. But she warned him that nobody had ever tried it between a human and a Valonian before. They were entering completely unknown territory. The device began scanning David's arm with beams of soft blue light. He felt a slight tingling sensation, but nothing painful. Numbers and symbols appeared on floating screens around them, showing the analysis of his genetic makeup. Zara watched the results with growing hope in her eyes. "Your blood is more compatible than I dared to hope," she whispered through the translation device. "But David, you need to understand something. This procedure will change both of us. We don't know exactly how, but the bond between our life forces will be permanent." David looked at her seriously. "What kind of changes are we talking about?" Zara explained that in the few cases where Valonians had performed this procedure with their own species, the individuals involved developed a mental connection. They could sense each other's emotions, share memories, and sometimes even communicate without speaking. But between different species, the effects were completely unpredictable. The sound of helicopter rotors was now very close. David could see searchlights beginning to sweep across the desert outside the craft. They were running out of time. "I'm ready," David said firmly. "Tell me what to do." Zara positioned him next to the medical device and had him place his arm in a curved opening. The machine created a gentle seal around his arm, but he could still move freely. She then positioned herself on the other side of the device and placed her own arm in a similar opening. The procedure began slowly. David felt a slight warmth spreading up his arm, as the device somehow extracted his blood without any pain or discomfort. On screens around them, he could see his red human blood mixing with Zara's silver Valonian blood. In a chamber within the machine, something amazing happened when their blood combined. Instead of just mixing together, the two different types of blood seemed to dance around each other, creating swirling patterns of red and silver. The mixture began to glow with a soft, pulsing light that seemed almost alive. As the treated blood began flowing back into both of their bodies, David immediately felt something extraordinary happening. It started as a warm sensation in his chest, like drinking hot coffee on a cold morning, but then it spread throughout his entire body, bringing with it a feeling of strength and energy he had never experienced before. But the physical changes were nothing compared to what happened in his mind. Suddenly, David could feel Zara's presence in his thoughts, not her actual thoughts, but her emotions, her fears, her hopes. He could sense her relief as the life-threatening injuries began to heal, but also her worry about what they had just done. Zara's transformation was even more dramatic. The wounds on her arms and torso closed completely, leaving no scars behind. Her blue skin regained its bright, healthy glow, and her silver hair seemed to flow with new life. But like David, the most significant changes were happening in her mind. "I can feel your memories," she said in wonder, and David realized she was no longer using the translation device. Somehow, they were now communicating directly, mind to mind. Through their new connection, Zara began sharing her memories with David. He saw images of her home world, a beautiful planet with crystal cities that reached toward the clouds and vast oceans that sparkled like liquid jewels. He saw her family, her father the king, and her people living in harmony with technology that seemed like magic. But he also saw the darker memories, the enemy ships that had been attacking Valonian worlds for years, destroying entire civilizations. The desperate meetings where her father and other leaders tried to find ways to protect their people. The dangerous mission that had brought her to Earth, hoping to forge an alliance with humanity before it was too late. David shared his own memories in return. Zara experienced his childhood, his decision to join the military, and his deep love for his family back home. She felt his simple desire to help others and protect innocent people, which had led him to risk everything to save her life. As their mental connection deepened, both of them began to understand things that had been hidden before. David saw flashes of other humans throughout history who had encountered Valonians. Ancient cave paintings suddenly made sense as he realized they depicted meetings between their species. Thousands of years ago, Zara accessed genetic memories that had been dormant in her own mind. She learned that some Valonians had visited Earth regularly over the centuries, and a few had even chosen to stay and live among humans. This explained why certain humans, like David, carry genetic markers that made them compatible with Valonian biology. The most shocking revelation came when they both realized that their meeting wasn't entirely by chance. Some force had been guiding events to bring them together at this exact moment in time. The sabotage of Zara's ship, David's assignment to this particular patrol route, even the timing of the crash, all seemed to be part of a larger plan. Just as they were beginning to process these incredible revelations, the helicopter searchlights found the crash site. Bright beams of light flooded through the openings in the craft's hull. They could hear soldiers approaching on foot, their voices calling out commands. But something unexpected happened. As the soldiers got closer, Zara's spacecraft began to respond to the new bond between its princess and the human who had saved her life. Ancient systems that had been dormant for centuries suddenly came online. A shimmering energy field surrounded the entire crash site, making it invisible to the approaching search teams. David and Zara watched in amazement as the soldiers walked right past their location, their instruments unable to detect the cloaked spacecraft. They were safe for now, but both of them knew that this was just the beginning of a much larger adventure. Through their mental connection, Zara shared one final, terrifying piece of information. The enemies who had sabotaged her ship were already on their way to Earth. The blood bond that had saved her life had also sent out a signal across the galaxy, marking both of their locations for the alien confederation that wanted to destroy her people. They had gained incredible new abilities and formed a connection that transcended species. But they had also become targets in a war that would determine the fate of both Earth and the Valonian Empire. 3 months had passed since that life-changing night in the Nevada desert. David's whole world had turned upside down in ways he never could have imagined, officially. He was listed as missing in action. His family believed he had disappeared during a routine patrol. But the truth was far more incredible than anyone could guess. David was now living in a secret underground facility buried deep beneath the mountains of Colorado. The place was huge, with corridors that seemed to go on forever in rooms filled with technology that looked like it came from science fiction movies. But this wasn't fiction anymore. It was his new reality. The facility was run by a woman named Director Lisa Chen, a tough but fair leader who had been monitoring alien activity for over 20 years. She had short gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. When she first met David, she told him something that shocked him to his core. "We've been expecting visitors from space for decades," she explained as she led him through the facility's main corridor. "Your friend Princess Zara isn't the first alien we've encountered. We've been preparing for this day for a very long time." David learned that governments around the world had been working together in secret, building underground bases and developing new weapons technology. They knew that contact with alien civilizations was inevitable. What they hadn't expected was for that contact to come in the form of a dying princess, who would bond with one of their soldiers. Princess Zara was recovering in a special medical wing of the facility. The room where she stayed was designed to feel like her home world, with soft blue lighting and the gentle sound of water flowing over crystal formations. Her injuries had healed completely thanks to their blood bond, but she was learning to adapt to the changes in her own body and mind. The connection between David and Zara had grown stronger every day. They could now communicate with each other even when they were in different parts of the facility. Sometimes David would be eating lunch in the cafeteria and suddenly taste something sweet and unfamiliar, only to realize that Zara was trying some earth fruit for the first time several levels below. Their shared abilities were becoming more remarkable each week. David found that he could understand complex alien technology just by touching it. Machines that should have taken years to learn became as simple as operating a smartphone. His physical strength had increased dramatically, and he could run for hours without getting tired. Zara's changes were even more dramatic. Her already impressive Valonian abilities had been enhanced by their bond with human intuition and creativity. She could now pilot spacecraft with precision that amazed even her own people's standards. More importantly, she had developed a new ability that would prove crucial in the days ahead. She could sense when other aliens were nearby, especially if they meant harm. This ability was put to the test when Director Chen brought them disturbing news about what was happening in the outside world. "We have a serious problem," the director announced during one of their daily briefings. "Our intelligence networks have detected unusual activity in major governments around the world. Important leaders are making decisions that don't match their previous behavior patterns." Zara immediately understood what this meant through their mental connection. She shared her fears with David. The Dominion Swarm, the enemy confederation that had destroyed so many Valonian worlds, had a terrifying ability. They could take over the bodies of other beings, wearing them like disguises while they slowly destroyed civilizations from within. David felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the implications. "You're saying that world leaders might not actually be human anymore." "That's exactly what I'm saying," Director Chen replied grimly. "And if the Dominion has already begun infiltrating Earth's governments, then we're running out of time faster than we thought." Over the following weeks, David and Zara worked with the facility's scientists to develop ways to detect these alien infiltrators using their unique blood bond. They discovered that they could sense the presence of Dominion agents from several miles away. The aliens gave off a particular energy signature that felt wrong to both of them, like a sour taste in their minds. Their first field test came when they were sent to investigate a suspicious meeting at the United Nations building in New York, disguised as security consultants. David and Zara walked through the halls, where world leaders were discussing important international policies. The results were terrifying. Out of 12 major world leaders present that day, David and Zara identified 4 who were definitely not human anymore. These beings looked perfect on the outside, but their energy signatures screamed danger to the bonded pair's enhanced senses. Even worse, the infiltrators seemed to be pushing for policies that would weaken Earth's defenses. They were voting against space monitoring programs, reducing military budgets, and blocking international cooperation projects. Every decision they made seemed designed to leave Earth vulnerable to attack. As they gathered this intelligence, Zara received troubling news through her spacecraft's long-range communication systems. The main Dominion fleet had been detected moving toward Earth's solar system. Her father's forces were fighting desperately to slow them down, but they were vastly outnumbered. We have maybe 6 months before they arrive in full force, Zara told David as they sat in her recovery room that night. My people can't stop them alone. Earth's military isn't ready for this kind of warfare. We need another solution. That's when Zara revealed the secret she had been hesitant to share. Hidden somewhere on Earth were 3 ancient Valonian artifacts, placed there by her ancestors thousands of years ago. These artifacts were incredibly powerful, designed as a last resort for protecting entire star systems from invasion. The artifacts were meant to be used together, she explained, but they require a very specific type of energy to activate them, the kind of energy that our blood bond produces. David understood immediately. You're saying that we're the key to activating these ancient weapons? Not weapons exactly, Zara corrected. They're more like shields. When activated properly, they can create a protective barrier around an entire solar system. Nothing hostile can get through, but peaceful. Ships can pass freely. The problem was that nobody knew exactly where the artifacts were hidden. The records had been lost over the centuries, and finding them would require traveling to different parts of the world, while being hunted by both Dominion infiltrators and possibly even human forces, who didn't understand their mission. Director Chen called an emergency meeting of the world's secret alien defense network. Representatives from 12 countries gathered in the underground facility to hear Zara's proposal. The discussion was intense and sometimes heated, as leaders struggled to accept that their only hope might lie in trusting an alien princess and a missing soldier. In the end, they had no choice. Satellite observations confirmed that a massive fleet of unknown ships was indeed approaching from deep space. Earth's conventional weapons would be useless against Dominion technology. The artifacts represented their only chance of survival. As David and Zara prepared for their dangerous mission, they both knew that they were about to face challenges that would test not only their enhanced abilities, but also the strength of the bond between them. They would need to work together perfectly, trusting each other with their lives while racing against time to save both their worlds. The hidden war for Earth's future was about to begin, and everything would depend on a human soldier and an alien princess who had chosen to sacrifice everything for each other, and for the billions of innocent lives hanging in the balance. The mission to find the 3 ancient artifacts began at sunrise on a Tuesday morning. David and Zara stood at the entrance of the underground facility, looking out at the world they were about to risk everything to protect. They had spent weeks preparing for this journey, but nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to discover about themselves and their shared destiny. Their first destination was Egypt, specifically the area around the Great Pyramid of Giza. According to Zara's research into her people's ancient records, Valonian explorers had visited Earth over 4,000 years ago. They had been impressed by the humans' ability to build massive stone structures and had decided to hide their first artifacts somewhere beneath these monuments. The flight to Egypt was David's first time traveling internationally since the blood bond. As their plane crossed over the Atlantic Ocean, he began experiencing strange sensations. Images flashed through his mind that weren't his own memories. He saw ancient Egypt as it had been thousands of years ago, with Valonian ships landing under cover of darkness, and alien visitors working alongside human builders. These aren't just visions, Zara explained as she sensed his confusion through their mental connection. Our bond is awakening genetic memories that have been sleeping in both our species for millennia. You're seeing what your ancestors saw when they first met my people, when they arrived in Cairo. David and Zara posed as archaeological researchers, studying pyramid construction techniques. Their cover story was that they were investigating unusual electromagnetic readings detected deep beneath the Giza complex. What they didn't tell anyone was that these readings were coming from Zara's ability to sense the hidden artifact. Getting access to the restricted areas beneath the pyramids required help from Dr. Ahmed Hassan, an Egyptian archaeologist who was secretly part of the International Alien Defense Network. He had been waiting his entire career for this moment, knowing that someday visitors from space would return to reclaim what they had left behind. The journey into the pyramid's hidden chambers was like traveling back in time, as they descended through passages that hadn't been explored by modern humans. Zara's connection to the artifact grew stronger. She could feel it calling to her, recognizing her royal bloodline even after all these centuries. Deep beneath the pyramid, they found a chamber that wasn't on any archaeological map. The walls were covered with hieroglyphs, but these weren't ordinary Egyptian writing. Mixed in with the human symbols were Valonian characters that told the story of the first peaceful contact between their two species. At the center of the chamber sat the first artifact. It looked like a crystal sphere about the size of a basketball, but it seemed to contain an entire galaxy of swirling lights within its transparent surface. When Zara approached it, the sphere began to glow brighter, responding to her presence. But they weren't alone in the chamber. As David reached out to help Zara lift the artifact, shadows began moving in the corners of the room. 3 figures emerged from passages they hadn't noticed before. At first glance, they looked like members of Dr. Hassan's research team. But David's enhanced senses immediately detected something wrong. These weren't humans anymore. They were Dominion infiltrators who had been watching and waiting for someone to lead them to the artifacts. The alien imposters had perfect human appearances, but their energy signatures felt like ice water in David and Zara's minds. The battle that followed was unlike anything David had experienced. Even in his military training, the Dominion agents moved with inhuman speed and strength. But the blood bond had given David and Zara abilities that matched their attackers. They fought as a perfectly coordinated team, anticipating each other's moves and covering each other's weaknesses. Zara's combat skills had been enhanced far beyond normal Valonian capabilities. She moved like liquid light, her silver hair flowing, as she dodged energy blasts and struck back with precision that seemed impossible. David found that he could predict the infiltrators' attacks seconds before they happened, giving him an edge that turned the tide of the fight. When the dust settled, they had successfully claimed the first artifact, but they knew their enemies would be waiting at the remaining locations. The sphere felt warm in Zara's hands, and both of them could sense the incredible power contained within it. This was just one piece of a puzzle that would determine the fate of Earth and the Valonian Empire. Their second destination was the Amazon rainforest in Brazil, according to Zara's research. The second artifact had been entrusted to an indigenous tribe, whose ancestors had helped hide it centuries ago. The journey into the deep jungle was challenging, but David's enhanced physical abilities allowed him to keep up with Zara as they traveled through terrain that would have been impossible for a normal human. The tribe they sought was led by an elderly shaman named Chief Antonio, whose family had been guardians of ancient secrets for over 20 generations. When he saw Zara, his eyes widened with recognition that went beyond the physical world. "You are the star-touched one our legends speak of," he said in accented English. "My ancestors said you would return when the sky burned with foreign fire, Chief." Antonio led them to a hidden temple deep in the jungle, where the second artifact had been waiting for this moment. Unlike the crystal sphere from Egypt, this artifact was alive in a way that both fascinated and terrified David. It looked like a piece of living metal that seemed to breathe and pulse with its own heartbeat. When Zara touched this second artifact, something extraordinary happened. The living metal flowed up her arm like liquid, but instead of causing harm, it seemed to merge with her nervous system. Her eyes began to glow with the same silver light as her hair, and David could feel through their bond that she had become something more than either human or Valonian. "I can feel it connecting to every part of my mind," she whispered in amazement. "It's not just a weapon or a tool. It's like gaining a new sense that I never knew existed." The enhanced abilities granted by the second artifact allowed Zara to detect Dominion forces from much greater distances as they prepared to leave the Amazon. She sensed a massive alien presence approaching from the north. The enemy had found them again, but this time they were coming in much larger numbers. Their final destination was Antarctica, where the third and most powerful artifact waited beneath miles of ancient ice. The journey to the frozen continent was the most dangerous yet, not just because of the harsh environment, but because the Dominion had established a forward base there to intercept them. As their plane approached the research station that would serve as their base camp, David could see strange lights moving beneath the ice. Ships that definitely weren't from Earth were already at work, trying to claim the final artifact before the humans could reach it. The race to the bottom of the world had begun, and everything David and Zara had learned about themselves and their abilities would be put to the ultimate test. The future of two worlds depended on reaching that final artifact before their enemies could claim the power that had been waiting in the ice for thousands of years. Standing at the edge of the Antarctic wilderness, with alien lights glowing beneath their feet and enemy ships patrolling the skies above, David realized that this frozen wasteland would be where they would finally learn the truth about their destiny and the real purpose behind the blood bond that had brought them together on that night in the Nevada desert. The final battle for Earth's future began in the most unlikely place on the planet. Antarctica stretched out before David and Zara like an endless white desert. But beneath the ice lay secrets that would change everything. The temperature was so cold that their breath formed clouds in the air, and the wind howled across the frozen landscape like a warning of the dangers ahead. The research station where they had landed was barely visible against the white wilderness. Only a few small buildings marked human presence in this vast emptiness. But David's enhanced senses could detect much more than what his eyes could see. Underground, something massive was waiting for them. The third artifact is directly below. U.S., Zara said, her silver hair whipping in the Antarctic wind. But we're not the only ones who know where it is. Through their mental connection, David could feel what she was sensing. Dozens of alien presences were moving beneath the ice, and more were approaching from above. The Dominion had arrived in force, determined to claim the final artifact before the humans could activate all three together. Dr. Rebecca Torres, the head of the research station, met them at the main building. She was a tough woman who had spent her entire career studying the mysteries hidden beneath Antarctic ice. Like many others in the secret alien defense network, she had been waiting for this day her whole life. We've been monitoring unusual energy readings from deep below for weeks, she explained as she led them to the equipment room. But in the last 3 days, the readings have gone completely off the charts. Something down their nose are coming. David and Zara equipped themselves with the specialized gear they would need for the descent through the ice. But as they prepared for the dangerous journey, alarms began sounding throughout the research station. On the monitoring screens, they could see aircraft approaching that definitely weren't from Earth. The Dominion ships were sleek and dark, moving through the sky with impossible grace. As they landed around the research station, David got his first real look at their enemies. The aliens that emerged from the ships looked different from anything he had seen before. They were tall and thin, with skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their movements were precise and mechanical, like living machines programmed for destruction. We need to reach that artifact now, Zara said urgently. Once the Dominion gets their hands on it, they'll be able to track and destroy every Valonian refugee ship trying to escape their dying worlds. The descent into the ice was like traveling to another planet. They rode a specialized elevator that had been secretly installed by the research team, dropping thousands of feet through layers of ancient frozen water. As they went deeper, the walls of ice around them began to glow with a soft blue light that seemed familiar to both of them. At the bottom of the shaft, they found something incredible. The third artifact wasn't sitting in a chamber like the others. Instead, it was the chamber. An entire crystalline structure the size of a cathedral had been frozen in the ice for thousands of years, waiting for the right moment to awaken. As soon as David and Zara stepped into the crystal chamber, everything changed. The walls began to pulse with energy, and symbols appeared in the air around them, floating like holograms. But these weren't just any symbols. They were the story of David's own family history. Going back generations, "This is impossible," David whispered as he watched the floating images. "These are my ancestors." The truth hit him like a thunderbolt. His great-great-grandmother hadn't been entirely human. She had been one of the Valonians who had chosen to stay on Earth centuries ago, living among humans and starting a family. The genetic markers in his blood weren't just compatible with Valonian physiology. They were Valonian, passed down through generations of his family who had never known their true heritage. Zara placed her hands on the crystal walls, and immediately the entire structure came alive. The living metal artifact from the Amazon began flowing across her body, connecting with the crystalline chamber. The sphere from Egypt floated up from David's backpack, joining the growing network of energy that surrounded them. Above them, they could hear the sounds of battle. As Dominion forces fought their way through the research station's defenses, explosions echoed down through the ice, and the elevator shaft began to fill with smoke and the sound of alien weapons. "They're coming," David said, readying himself for the final confrontation. But Zara shook her head. "It doesn't matter anymore. We're not just activating the artifacts, we're becoming part of them." As the three artifacts merged their power, something extraordinary began happening to both David and Zara. The blood bond they had shared for months was expanding, connecting them not just to each other, but to every human and Valonian in the solar system. They could suddenly sense millions of minds, all linked together in a network of consciousness that spanned across space. The energy barrier that formed around Earth wasn't just a shield. It was a bridge between dimensions, allowing Valonian refugee ships to escape through space-time itself to reach safety. At the same time, humans all over the planet began experiencing strange new abilities as the artifact network awakened dormant genetic codes in anyone with even the smallest trace of ancient Valonian heritage. David felt himself changing in ways that went beyond physical transformation. His consciousness was expanding, allowing him to see and understand things that had been impossible before. He could perceive multiple dimensions simultaneously, communicate with beings across vast distances, and access knowledge that had been hidden for millennia. Zara's transformation was even more dramatic. She had become a living bridge between the human and Valonian species. Her body and mind adapted to serve as a permanent connection point for the new hybrid consciousness that was emerging. When the Dominion forces finally broke through to the crystal chamber, they found something they couldn't understand or fight. David and Zara were no longer separate individuals, but part of a larger intelligence that existed across multiple planes of reality. The artifacts had merged not just their technology, but their very essence with the life force of both species. The Dominion attack ships found their weapons useless against the energy barrier surrounding Earth. But more than that, they discovered that their own technology was being turned against them by the new hybrid intelligence. Ships that had been programmed for destruction were being reprogrammed for exploration and peace. In the months that followed, Earth became the center of a new galactic civilization. The floating crystal cities that appeared in orbit around the planet were home to beings who were neither fully human nor fully Valonian, but something entirely new. They had the curiosity and creativity of humanity combined with the wisdom and advanced technology of the Valonian Empire. David, now evolved far beyond his original human form, became Earth's first ambassador to the new Galactic Peace Alliance. His military training and natural instinct to protect others made him perfect for helping establish treaties and cooperation agreements between different species throughout the galaxy. Zara chose to remain primarily on Earth, serving as a teacher and guide for the new hybrid children who were being born. These children represented the future of both species, possessing abilities that their parents could barely comprehend. As David stood on the observation deck of the orbital city he now called home, looking down at the blue and white planet where his incredible journey had begun, he thought about that night in the Nevada desert when everything had changed. A simple decision to help a dying stranger had led to the transformation of two entire species and the birth of a new kind of consciousness. The blood bond between a human soldier and an alien princess had become the foundation for a galactic civilization built on understanding, cooperation, and the recognition that the boundaries between different forms of life were far less important than the connections that could be made when beings chose to help each other. Earth was no longer just a single planet in a vast universe. It had become the heart of something much larger, a place where the impossible had become not just possible, but inevitable. And it all started with one human warrior who chose compassion over fear, and one alien princess who trusted in the goodness of a species she had never met before.